today to present some opening remarks and then hopefully have a roundtable discussion in consultation with Melissa and Jean Marie. We thought it'd be best to tape record my initial remarks so you could use this in an ongoing way, and then stop the recording so we can have a more informal discussion to encourage people to speak with each other without being recorded. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, can you see the PowerPoint, hopefully? Okay. Let me know if you can't hear or see anything here on my end. I have no disclosures. My email address is here. I will send this PowerPoint to Melissa and Jean Marie after the talk for distribution. So you'll have a copy of all of this. Don't feel like you need to be writing this down. And I'll also send you my updated diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism resources list, which is about 20 pages, which resides at the ADAPSEF website. That's the Association for Directors of Medical Student Education, Education in Psychiatry. And they just started a committee on DEIA, which I serve as a consultant. And so I started this list of resources, which I update monthly. So I'll send that also to Melissa and Jean Marie for distribution. Today, I'm just going to give some broad strokes about some of the activities that have been happening nationally, and also just mention the bystander intervention, which some of you may be familiar with already. And we can then launch into our discussion. A year ago, on March 19th, 3 San Francisco organizations initiated the Stop AAPI Hate website. These were 3 organizations listed here in San Francisco, and they set forth the idea of tracking and responding to incidences of hate, violence, discrimination, etc., against AAPI. Very important that they're interested in all hate incidences, not strictly hate crimes, which is much more narrowly defined. And they had a 5-prong approach in their organization to encourage people to report such incidences and provide assistance to community leaders and so forth, and advocate for policies that would prevent this from happening. And it's truly ironic that on Tuesday, March 16th, during the day, they issued their kind of cumulative national report that covered this whole year. And this is the preface of it. It reported on about 3,800 incidences. This is only a fraction of incidences that have occurred because of the underreporting issue. And as we all know, later that day, there was the terrible shooting in Atlanta. And so this is their summary here that verbal harassment, 68%, shunning, physical assaults, third largest, civil rights violations, and online harassment. National trends, women report hate incidents 2.3 times more than men. And I think this is also reported in the media as well in relation to the Atlanta shootings, that that's a very startling statistic about women at least reporting incidences higher than men. Again, we don't know how much of the underreporting issue plays a role in that, obviously. And in their report, only 6.2% of the total incidences were seniors. But in the press, of course, in the media, there have been many more reports of the elderly being assaulted. And again, how much of that is just different ways of reporting and what the media captures and so on. The Chinese having the largest ethnic group, but also all these other Asian subgroups. And I think that's related, of course, to the kind of the tendency among some to just associate any Asian-looking face as Chinese or whatever, and there's no fine attunement there. Coming from all 50 states and involving different sites of attacks. Now, so here's just a graphic on that, as you can see. Business and public street and sidewalk. Right. Now, there's no mention here of healthcare facility exactly, but and then types of discrimination. The verbal and the avoidance or shunning being the most, and assault reported at only 11%. And here's the graphic on the ethnicity of response. I think there was a very high profile case in San Francisco in late January. An elderly man from Thai background was pushed in as he was walking his dog or something in the suburban part of San Francisco, and he subsequently died. And he was Thai. So and here's a graphic on the gender and the age. And these are the top states. California, 44%, New York, 13%, Washington, 4%, and so on. Now, there's another organization that's been studying this as part of its work at California State University at San Bernardino. They issued a fact sheet. They have a Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism, and they issued a fact sheet on March 21st. And you can obtain it at this website. Sorry for the small size, I couldn't enlarge it here. But I think the most interesting thing, this looked at anti-Asian hate crime incidences, and again, that's a stricter definition. If you look at the far right there in New York City, the jump from 2019 in the light blue to the 2020 in the dark blue, I think is quite pronounced, and more so than the other major cities that are listed here. And by the way, I attended a webinar that was given, kind of an informational town hall meeting, actually, that Representative Grace Meng gave on Thursday, and Letitia James, the state attorney general, was there, and faith leaders from many communities spoke. And I don't know if that town hall has been recorded, maybe it's on Representative Grace Meng's website, but it was very healing to hear from so many community leaders about the situation in New York. And also they gave lots of resources, websites and things specific to New York. So that would be a good resource, I think, to access. Now, looking at the national front, and it's just remarkable how much national activity has taken place. First of all, at the U.S. House Judiciary Committee, the Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties had a hearing on the topic of discrimination and violence against Asian Americans on Thursday, March 18, 2 days after the Atlanta shooting. And this was the first such hearing in 34 years at Congress, which is really kind of unbelievable. And this had been scheduled months in advance. It didn't just happen. Again, it's so ironic or synchronous, whatever your viewpoint of such matters are. But I've given you here the website, and there you can access the entire 3-hour video of the hearing, as well as backup documents that were submitted by the witnesses. There were 6 members of Congress that spoke initially. And then you had representatives from these organizations, the Asian American Advancing Justice and the Stop AAPI Hate. And then you had thought leaders who spoke. And I thought that Erica Lee, who has written a book on the history of xenophobia in America, I think it's called America for Americans, spoke, and her testimony is on the website. And I thought the testimony of the lawyer from UCLA was very interesting as well. So those materials are available for you to look at and to study. And again, interesting. Now, also, I think that, thank God that we have President Biden, who 6 days after his inauguration issued a memorandum condemning and combating racism, xenophobia, intolerance against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And it's on the whitehouse.gov website, and I've given you the specific URL here, which again I'll send to Melissa and Jean Marie. And then I think in response to what happened in Atlanta on March 30th, he issued a fact sheet announcing additional actions. And on that March 30th fact sheet, these were kind of the bullet points, if you will. Reinvigorating the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, with a focus on anti-Asian bias and violence. That initiative did exist in previous administrations, but now there's a specific focus on this topic. Survivors of domestic violence and sexual assaults. I think the whole issue of xenophobia and misogyny and so forth, that intersectional effect, which may have been seen in the Atlanta shooting, is that is speculative, of course, but I think is worth discussing. And then the whole COVID-19 Equity Task Force that's been convened under that whole COVID response unit will be continuing to look at this topic. Then, of course, at the Department of Justice, there's this real effort to look at this topic from a legal civil rights point of view, and there were additional bullet points listed. And then I thought this was very interesting, that they were going to create a virtual bookshelf of materials that celebrated Asian American contributions to the U.S. and then funding for research to address xenophobia and bias. And we'll have to read the fine print about where that funding will be directed towards, and to what extent can the psychiatrists participate in that. Now, at the American Psychiatric Association on March 22nd, they put forth a statement about this whole matter, and they did reference two interesting reports that I wanted to call to your attention. One is that in Psychiatric News back in June, this article reported on the work of the Caucus of Asian American Psychiatrists of APA to study this topic of COVID and COVID pandemic and anti-Asian sentiment. And Dora Wang is the president of the caucus, and she did participate on a general session for the APA on-demand annual meeting, which I served as a discussant. And so that will be available. I think it's called The Dual Pandemic, Asian American Hate, The Dual Pandemic, headed by Neha Trin, T-R-I-N-H, from Mass General. She was the chairperson of that general session. And then the other thing that was mentioned here on this, with this statement, was this very interesting article, Alleviating the Mental Health Burden of Structural Discrimination and Hate Crimes, the Role of Psychiatrists, which came out in the American Journal in October of 2018. And the lead author was Helena Hansen. And I thought this was a very interesting article, and I would commend you folks out there to take a look at it, because it starts with 3 case vignettes and is able to tie case vignettes to larger structural issues, and this idea of structural discrimination. Also mentioned are these resources from the APA Division of Diversity and Health Equity, and I've given you the website for that. And I should say that in the past 3 years, the Council on Minority Mental Health and Health Disparities, along with the MUR assembly group had been working on these fact sheets and toolkits and best practices. And they have a lot of like pithy information to help you guide your approaches here. And if we have time, we may be able to access some of these and I can walk you through some of them. But I do think that you know, we don't need to kind of reinvent the wheel, if you if you will. I mean, there are some basic materials and approaches that are available that has gone through a review process that I think would be useful to you. Now, in terms of one approach that has been talked about in terms of these sorts of, when encountering hate incidences, is the bystander intervention approach. And I think I gave the website, Hollaback website at the beginning. And they're trying to help us move from a position of not acting to doing something, to break the cycle, and I think it does need a certain amount of understanding and training that one can take through their website. But just to give you a kind of a bird's eye view of this approach, the reasons for not acting, some of them are listed here, and of course we have safety first is always of a concern that we need to take into consideration. But is there some way of the bystanders, you know, being moved in some way to help out? So when intervening, prioritize own safety. There are 5 Ds. So these are the first 2 Ds. Distract, take an indirect approach to de-escalate the situation. These were examples given. Can you tell me where the closest grocery store is? Public spaces, start a conversation with the person being harassed or find another way to draw attention away from them. Delegate, get help from someone else. That woman over there is being verbally attacked. Would you feel comfortable saying something? Document, helpful to document. The whole issue of videotaping and or take, you know, and what to do with that, and possibly giving it to that person. Delay, after the incident is over, check in with the person who experienced a disrespectful behavior. Can I sit with you? Can I accompany you somewhere? What do you need? And direct. Speak up about the disrespectful behavior. I understand you were scared, but he deserves to be treated with respect. You can directly name the behavior, saying that's racist, but that's may not be the best approach to be so direct. You can name what you observe, such as she looks uncomfortable. Why don't you leave her alone? So I think that's my, well, just one other thing. Oops. Sorry. Yeah, there's, in my review of the literature, I did come across this, article that was in Psych News last year on the Asian Women's Action for Resilience and Empowerment, or acronym was AWARE, which culturally grounded intervention designed for use on college campuses to address unmet mental health needs of Asian American women who with a low utilization of mental health services. I think that's a finding that we find throughout, the low utilization of services. It doesn't mean that the Asian Americans are model minorities that don't need mental health services. I think there are issues of stigma of mental illness being high, and also the availability of culturally and linguistically appropriate services can all lead to this underutilization. So this article in Psych News that I referenced below presented on 8 weeks of face-to-face group therapy sessions led by Asian American therapists. And they analyzed 4 levels of mental health risk factors at the individual, family, community, and systems levels. And they're just, some of these are described, some of the risk factors: perfectionism, low self-esteem, unhealthy coping, family structures, disempowering parenting, competing identities between good daughter and successful individual, intrusiveness of family, community, feelings of isolation, experiences of discrimination, managing microaggressions. And I want to mention here, before I forget, that in the V code section of the DSM-5, which we tend to forget about, these are the Z codes in ICD-10 and 11, there is a V code for perceived, target of perceived discrimination. There is that V code, which I think is something that many may not even be aware of. The V code section, these are not mental disorders, so they're not billable, so we don't even think about them as part of the diagnosis. But I chaired a general session for the APA annual meeting, which will be live on May 1st, which focused specifically on this topic, that enhanced use of the outline for cultural formulation by including the social determinants of mental health through V codes as a diagnosis can lead to better treatment planning by diagnosing the distressing experience that the person might be having, and then including that in the treatment plan. And then at the systems level, these norms. And so this were approaches that this intervention used to address these risk factors. I thought was very interesting. I think this is an example of adapting our work with culture and language in mind. So at the cognitive level, focusing on those maladaptive, perfectionistic assumptions, the importance of psychoeducation, and being mindful of the family dynamics, family conflicts, and how to help that whole process. And then a group-based approach. They used Asian American women therapists with the Asian American patients, and using a group approach. And speaking about the complexities of bicultural identity, the potential conflicts that might come up, and how to deal with microaggressions. And finally, the use of female Asian American therapists, and being aware of this whole approach, and a focus on the therapeutic alliance. with a cultural lens. So I think that ends my formal remarks. And so